This is Ross Marquand, Aaron from The Walking Dead. You're listening to The Walking Dead Underground Podcast.
Now your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
And you are listening to the Walking Dead Underground Podcast, and I'm your host, Cinik, and joining me, as always, my co-host, and two of the world's biggest mac and cheese and sardine connoisseurs, Igrihe and Ryan. And on this week's show, we do a full breakdown on why it's important to print enough pamphlets if you're deciding to start a revolution. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Simon. We also do a full review of Season 8, Episode 15, entitled Worth, because we are the Walking Dead Underground Podcast, and we want to thank you for your continued likes and listens and subscriptions, and most importantly, that you're still enjoying the show. We opened this week's episode with Rick reading Carl's letter, and I'm not sure where I can see Maggie basically lose her whole family and lose her mind, crying, or Daryl ugly cry for a whole hour, but the second Rick breaks down, I know it's going to be a long episode for me. Somebody's talking to me and I got to go, ooh, hold on a second, and I got to gather myself. So Ryan, do you think that Rick was so resistant to reading Carl's letter because once it's finally read, he's actually gone in his mind?
I think that has something to do with it. I think that, obviously there's a huge amount of grief, and on some level it is closure. So, obviously intellectually he must realize that he's gone, but I think that, reading that letter represents the end. That's the last thing he's going to get from Carl. Like, this is a different world from what we're used to. So all that he really has left of Carl, he's not going to have pictures. He's not going to have videos. He's going to have that letter. And
you've seen that really throughout TV, haven't you? I mean, Bobby Bacala on The Sopranos didn't want to eat his wife's last lasagna. I mean, there's been a lot of instances where you hear people that, they won't throw their wives' clothes out, or they won't get rid of their husband's car because that's their last connection to him, and that's the last piece of them on Earth. IG, you're like me. Did hearing Carl's voice narrate the letter give you the feels? Did it strike the right emotional tone for you?
It really did. It really made me kind of think about it and think about the finality of Carl being gone, because the likelihood that we're going to get even any more letters being read or anything is really dwindling now. I mean, there's going to be no more voiceovers. There's going to be nothing. So, even being a parent myself kind of makes me think, put myself in Rick's shoes as trying to keep life going, like feel like there's a reason to keep doing this. And yet you've lost literally everything. His wife is gone. His child is gone. I mean, he's there literally for himself now. So Judith is there, but Judith, does he even know that Judith isn't his? Maybe. I mean, he's got to have thoughts. So it really does kind of strike a weird tone with me. And it did really give me the feels, especially seeing how mature he was to write the things that he wrote. I mean, that was an unexpected level of maturity that I got from him and from those letters, and it was really impressive.
It is weird with the character because through the course of the series, Carl is kind of freewheeled through the series, making stupid, childish mistakes. And when he finally kind of comes into his own and starts being an adult and starts making smart decisions, he makes the stupidest decision of all that get him killed. And what I found with this is pretty interesting. I mean, when we go, most of us go quickly. It's an accident or an unforeseen illness, but it's fast. You don't really get a chance to get your thoughts together or say goodbye to everybody. But in this instance, he did. Like a long-term illness, you have nothing left but your thoughts and your goodbyes. And the way Carl wrapped this up for Rick, it was kind of a message of hope and new beginnings and healings and wanting Rick most of all to feel safe. Can something like this change the path, Ryan, that the sheriff is headed down? I mean, we saw last week, he went extremely dark side.
Rick, in a lot of ways, is worse than Negan. I mean, if we look at their actions and kind of what's been revealed about Negan in the last few weeks, Negan's a far more sympathetic character right now. And at this point, I think he's somebody who seems to mean well, just maybe doesn't go about things the right way, where Rick has gone fully the dark side. I mean, to pull out a pro wrestling term, it's kind of been a double switch if you really think about it. I mean, Negan's kind of gone into a baby face over the last couple of weeks, and Rick's turned heel, and it's really bad. But I do think that it's clear that Carl's death and his letter is leading towards Rick eventually, and Rick's kind of turn to the dark side is going to lead to Rick eventually showing mercy, likely to Negan, at a moment when he could kill him. And I think I wish maybe there was a kind of a more deft hand in handling it, and maybe if it was a little more subtly done. But, I think it's pretty clear this is where we're headed.
IG, in the letter, Carl tells him we have to find a way forward. We have to make it so it'll never happen again. And if you're Rick in the Alliance, how do you do this? How do you mend the fences that have been so vastly broken from the second that Negan stepped off that caravan?
Well, the problem is you don't know what the future is going to bring. So to say that you can never let this happen again, this wasn't entirely their fault to begin with. Because, a lot of this came from aggression from the other side. And, a lot of times the initial reaction to aggression is going to be aggression. It's just nature. It's because it's that fight or flight symptoms that we all deal with. And, when you have a group of people, your instinct to fight is going to be a lot stronger than your instinct to run. By yourself, sure, you might be just as inclined to run, but groups tend to get a little more brazen, and that's kind of what's happened. And now it's turned into an all-out fracas, just going nuts. So the way to fix it, though, is to just try and find some common ground, and literally somebody's going to have to die. It just is. Like, it's either going to have to be Rick or Negan, probably, or someone close to them, to get them to at least have a moment where they go, oh, Lord, okay, maybe we should not be doing this. But something drastic is going to have to happen, and it's going to be interesting to see what that is going to be. I think we're actually going to get resolution this season with this particular storyline. I don't think saviors are going into, or at least the conflict that we've had is going into next season, because it seems to be nearing its completion. At least I hope so. If they drag this another season, then they're going to have a lot of pacing problems, and they've had plenty this year. It'd be worse to take it a second year.
I don't think so. I think they build the upcoming show as the end of the war. So I think this is going to be it. I think we're going to finally get this wrapped up. We're going to move on to new business, so to speak, whichever way they decide to go with that business. They opened up a lot of questions last week. Unfortunately, we were off and really couldn't cover the show. Where do they go from here? How do they go forward? Do we attempt the Whispers, which is ultra violent and ways probably not suitable for TV, or do we jump right to the next big conflict, or do we spend a season actually dealing with the dead, which people seem to, or at least used to love about the show? The zombies were the problem, and everybody left alive was kind of working together. So I'm not quite sure where they go from there. But if we just usher in the next group of heels, so to speak, Ryan, people are going to be a little bit disenchanted with the show, no?
The problem now is the walkers or the zombies are really not a threat anymore. They're only a threat when the writing calls for it, and it's usually like by surprise, or they become stealth walkers, or there's a massive amount of them. But really, they're not really, they're not a threat. So it'll be interesting to see where the show goes, because you're right. We're just going to go from one major villain to another major villain, and maybe I would like to see something different, but I don't know that really focusing on the walkers is the real thing. So I think this is a huge challenge for the show. I don't know where they're going to go, and I'm not sure where they are in the comics, or if there's a storyline in the comics that really makes sense. But I think you don't want to be redundant. You don't want to have the same thing. We go from the governor, we go to Negan. So we got another big bad, or maybe there's a story out there that we can actually find. But I guess we'll find out. I do hope that next week ends this war.
IG, if we do skip or forego the next human danger, is Reconstruction and the walkers enough to keep you watching the show? If you're in the chair, if you're calling the shots right now, which way do you take the series?
Well, I think you don't have to go full to either direction myself. I think having some of the more human elements that were in some of the earlier seasons that got people really into this helps quite a bit, but you can't just stay there. That season on the farm, where it was mostly that, started to hurt pretty badly. Like, the first season was amazing, but everybody was brand new into this, so it was still like learning what's going on and how it works. The second season, they kind of knew what was going on, and then they just sat and did nothing. That's why it got better when we got further seasons. And then this season, the biggest problem wasn't what was going on. It was the pacing. And they took a lot of time to tell not very much. And that's the problem they had in this season. The story itself is interesting, but it should have been done in about 4 hours instead of we're working on 16. So maybe they just needed to be able to split it up with other tribulations, other things going on, like, we're running out of water, and do some stories like that. Maybe that would have given us some more feeling to why they're in such despair. And maybe they can do some of that. And maybe that's something that they can look at. But honestly, they're just going to have to find a way to improve their pacing. There has to be more going on. Maybe they need to power through more storylines in a season. Maybe the Saviors, although interesting, and I love Negan, he's a great, great villain. Maybe he needed to get started and ended in the same season. Maybe that's what needed to happen, because it just seems like they've drug it on forever just because Jeffrey Dean Morgan is amazing. And I'll admit that he is. He's done a great job with the character. He's a great actor, but they just took this too long. And so they're going to have to figure out a way around that.
Ryan kind of missed a few steps, and they were important steps along the way, because this is what drug our feet or the show to a screeching halt. We went from the governor, and then we went to the people at Terminus, and then we went to the wolves, and then we went to the Saviors. So that's, 4 separate human groups were, and not to mention the claimed group that, wasn't that big of a deal, but they were an element to the show for at least, I'd say, a 4 or 5 episode arc. That aspect of the storytelling is ground to a halt. And it just makes you wonder that maybe if we would have spent less time on these groups in the middle, this type of storytelling wouldn't feel as stale as it is.
It's a problem with that the show's created. Would we be willing to sit and watch a show about Reconstruction? If it was just about the reconstructing a society, I would be interested in that. But is that something that's going to provide the drama that people have come to expect from this show? And would it kill the ratings if written properly? Which is a huge question for The Walking Dead. You could come up with something that is interesting, and does take it in a different place, where the walkers are still a threat, but they're trying to redevelop society. So I think there are stories to tell that isn't just the next big bad or the next antagonistic society, because that story is stale. But my fear is that that's kind of what The Walking Dead has become, is that you have this group, they survive a war with another group, and then they pick up, they try to rebuild, and then they find another group, and then they, maybe the group's good, maybe they're bad, but then they end up becoming an antagonist, and it just kind of rinse repeat.
Well, I'm hoping that at some point they can find a group that isn't antagonistic. I think the problem with the show right now is, like, every group they've encountered has been a downer. At some point, you got to get something that lifts you up. I mean, yes, when they found Alexandria, that lifted them up, but literally they were cowering in Alexandria, and Rick's group came in and lifted them up. I think they need to go find another group that is pretty much equally strong, but more than willing to join forces and maybe come up against even a bigger bad than Negan, which I know is a strange concept to think of, because Negan is a pretty big bad. But, getting some more core people, like getting the Kingdom was great, because Ezekiel with Shiva and everything, amazing. But then, like, especially the last 4 or 5 episodes, like, King Ezekiel has been doing nothing. And that's a tragedy to this show, because he's just charismatic and fun to watch, and he chews scenery. And why don't we have more of them? Like, we got a shot of Jerry walking with a baby in his arms yesterday. That's all we got of Jerry. I mean, there's things that they're missing that if we get some more people in here, maybe can help jostle some of this around.
What you have there is a big cast problem, because you're never going to have enough for everybody to do. But I'll tell you one thing that doesn't get old, Ryan, and I know you appreciate it as much as I have. I've seen too much. I've survived too much, and it's not going to end with me wandering off into the woods with my dick in my hand. Is there not something magical about Gregory and Simon on screen together, even if it's just for his groveling skills alone? Do you think Simon has some sort of fondness for the Big G?
Yeah, I think it was clear. You could even see that he was fledgling leader of the Saviors, or at least what he thought. He needs to be strong, but you could tell he actually didn't want to punish Gregory. So, I do think they have a great dynamic together. They have great chemistry. And it's kind of they're perfect balance, and actually really, really loved that scene. I kind of felt like this was going to be his demise, so I was kind of sad that we wouldn't get more of that. But it was really a fun scene to watch them together. And they did have kind of tremendous chemistry together.
Simon always struck me as a self-made psychopath. Like, he's smarter than he was supposed to be. He made it further in life than he should have. And I think he got a kick out of being able to keep up with Gregory intellectually, but also have power over this guy who probably had power over Simon before this all happened. The Gregories of the world probably held Simon down pretty well. That was his bosses. That was his landlord. Gregory represented everything that he probably couldn't rise against. But in this situation, I'm the boss, and you're going to do what I say. And if not, then I'll just punch you in the mouth. Would Gregory made Simon perfect number 2, IG?
Yeah, actually, he probably would have, because he's somebody that will stoop to pretty low levels to get things done. And watching these two on screen, you know what? Amazing actors, both of them. And, everybody's like, oh, I hate Simon. I hate Gregory. I hate Simon. I hate Gregory. Well, that's like you have said on previous episodes here. That's what they're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to hate them. And if you can take a generally likable guy like Xander Berkeley and make you hate him on screen, he is just an amazing man. I met him at Walker Stalker. He's great. And he so easily makes you not like him. That is a skill, ladies and gentlemen. And to say that Gregory would be a great number 2 to Simon is basically an understatement, because I don't know as anybody'd be a better number 2. I mean, certainly not Dwight. He certainly wouldn't be, and that's who Simon tends to lean toward. I don't know why.
Even though Aaron's half killing himself trying to convince the Oceansiders to fight, they're resistant. IG, tell me both sides of the coins here. What's their motivation? Why is Aaron trying so hard to get these people involved who obviously have had enough? And why are they playing such good defense?
All right. So from Aaron's side, why do you want him to get there? Well, first of all, people are a resource. Negan is right. Even if they're just there to sharpen sticks, if they're doing something that you can get another person out on the battlefield, that works. Anything you can do to get more people involved is fine. Also, I think that Aaron, having gone through the loss that he went through, sees opportunity to save a group of people. And I think deep down, and not very far deep, that's what Aaron is. Aaron is a person that wants to save people. And I think that's why he fights so hard with Rick's group, is that he sees an opportunity to keep people alive and make the world back into at least a place that he would want to be. Now, from the other side, from the Oceansiders, their defense is so strong because they've been through hell. They lost every male they had to the Saviors. The Saviors killed them all. So they have found a place where the Saviors have yet to find them. They've been surviving by basically foraging and gathering. They have to kill a few walkers here and there, but not too many. They are apparently very adept at fishing. So they're not eating just nuts, berries, and tree bark. They're actually eating pretty well. So they don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't want to change the status quo. So I see both sides, but the problem with the Oceansiders side is that should the Saviors win, wouldn't it just be a matter of time until you're found out? Now, the problem with Aaron's side is if you do join them, you're going right into the fire. You're going to go in and you're going to be right there exposed to what if the Saviors win that fight. So, I mean, there's problems both ways. There's good things both ways. But I myself personally, I couldn't imagine not wanting to at least try and better my position and strengthening my group by joining in with people that are obviously not trying to hurt me, that are literally just trying to get me to be a part of something bigger. Because if someone's willing to basically run themselves to extreme exhaustion and risk their life over and over just to try and get me to believe him.
Aaron seems pretty desperate for the numbers, which means things must not be going very well with his side's attempt to take over the Saviors. Because I think if you're Oceanside, you've been through as traumatic an event as you can go through, and so if you're able to kind of carve out your little niche and keep your distance and isolate yourself and live a decent life and be happy and not under the savior's thumb, I think it would be really difficult to say, okay, here's this guy who's clearly desperate, clearly in need. They're clearly fighting them, but they're probably not winning, to the point where they needed to steal all of our weapons, to go fight them. Why would we want to join them? And then knowing how vicious the saviors can be, why put ourselves through that? So I think from Oceanside's perspective, I think it's lose-lose. If they get found out, fine. I mean, is that any worse than, if they go to war and, and then are clearly, they have no choice but to be found out. So I think from their perspective, I think it makes sense to kind of stay back and not ruffle any feathers.
Well, sometimes the waiting is worse though, right? Wouldn't you admit that like you get sent to the principal's office and you sit outside and wait for your doom? That kind of equates to this, right? It could be, it's almost better to go in and find out what's going on and know firsthand than to sit back and expect that things are just going to work themselves out and you're going to be fine when trouble is literally around the corner.
Because clearly they've isolated themselves enough that obviously they don't want to be around the saviors, so they'd rather they'll risk hiding, and sure, they might get caught, but at the end of the day, like that's a risk. I'd rather take I think they would rather take a few years free of the saviors and then get caught than to be under the savior's thumb the entire time. So yeah, I mean, I think that's clearly a risk that they're going to deal with, but it's just something they got to do. And I think after a couple of years, it doesn't look like the saviors are spending too much time trying to find them. So yeah, I get the point, but I still think that for them to join the fray, I think they have to see it as something, as a high, really high chances of winning. And right now, I don't think it looks like that at all.
Well, I'll tell you what I would ask from Oceanside, because I think that Negan is right. People are an asset. Here's the problem. And my major problem with Rick is he seems to mismanage people. He doesn't have a good grip on how to use people, because the Oceansiders have the one source of food that actually has benefited from this zombie apocalypse, the end of the world, is fish, because the less people, the more fish. So I would have used them or made some sort of agreement with them to get food, even though it sounds very Negan-esque. I'm not bashing anybody if they don't catch enough fish, but I would use them as a source of food and keep them protected and watch out for them. But I don't think I'd necessarily pull them into this fray. I would trade and barter with them some other way to try to make that work. But we're clearly split on IG. You seem very pro getting into the conflict. Ryan, you seem very anti getting into the conflict. Give me your major reason why, if you're the Oceansiders, you step up and you jump into this fight.
One reason is finality. You can at least get out of this. Either you're going to survive or you're going to die, and you don't need to sit and just kind of watch the line dwindle as you move up to the executioner's block.
All right, Ryan, why shouldn't they get involved?
Exactly that. You're you get to live, be happy, eat your fish, and not get killed by Negan. As simple as that. I mean, yeah. Like, no, I totally get IG's point, but I just think that everything is a risk reward, and at this stage, I think they're in a good enough position where the chances of them being outed or found out are pretty low. And so they can have their kind of life and live their life comfortably. It'd be different if they were aware of the saviors, putting out an all-out effort to find where they are and track them down, but that's not the case. And so in that case, I think that there's fairly low risk of them getting caught. So I don't think it really, I don't think it's a situation of them just hanging out waiting. And even if it happens, I'd take a few good years of being happy than, again, getting killed by the saviors. So I think for them to join the fray means almost certain death. And for them not to means that they can kind of sit, hang out and do their own thing and kind of be quiet, lay low.
I mean, we're all from different backgrounds, but Ryan, you live in New York City, which is some of the best food in the world. And nothing is more appetizing to me than lobster and macaroni and cheese when you go to a fine restaurant, because it's done well. But does anything sound worse to you than macaroni and cheese and sardines? How badly? How desperate do you need to be to dine on a bowl of mac and cheese and sardines? It's obvious that Gabe is still Team Rick and is holding out hope. But Ryan, without giving away any spoilers or going any further into the episode, did you think that there was a possibility that Eugene could be Team Rick as well, that he's just playing the long game and looking for his moment at that point where we first joined him back in the story in this episode?
I mean, I got to stay consistent. Remember, we talked about this episode 1, and I said that, or in our preview, and I said that Eugene to me was Team Negan. So I don't think he was going to turn. Well, okay, I won't get really into spoilers, but yeah, no, I didn't think there was a chance of Eugene turning out. And he, I just thought that he would say what he had to say, but I think he's Team Negan.
Oh, I still had hope. I had hope that maybe he had a bunch of dead primers that he was just dropping into things, and he just didn't need it to look too obvious when he was doing that. Like, there had to be something left in him. I've been Team Haircut the whole time. I'm like, come on, Eugene is awesome. We need him back on the right side. And I thought that there was some other game going on. Like, instead of powder, he was just putting sand in them.
Now, IG, we just got back from Vegas. And Negan is home. He confronts Dwight where his loyalties lie. He's playing some high-stakes poker here. I mean, if you're Dwight, after this first meeting, do you continue your bluff or do you fold and get the hell out of the sanctuary?
Well, first of all, his poker face is not very strong because every time Negan talks to me, it looks like he's about to shit his pants. So, it's like, all right, Negan knows because he keeps asking you this shit. Negan knows. And you are not helping your case by looking at him like, why aren't you just hitting me with Lucille? Because literally that's what Dwight looks like. He looks like he's just giving away all of his cards every time. So he is not a premier poker player. That is for sure. Maybe he needs the hat and the sunglasses or something, but he needs something else. So yeah, fold, get the hell out. Because you got to know just by the cues that Negan has given you that he knows exactly what's going on, because it's time for you to have something else happen, because this is not going to end well.
Negan finally gives Simon his coming to Jesus meeting after about 3 episodes of wilding out. But during that meeting, Ryan, did you pick up that he mentions that I remember what you did to all those men and those boys at that settlement? Is Simon the demented ghoul that led the slaughter on Oceanside? Did you see him going on his knees, and did you see the bat falling across his head in that moment?
It's a bit of a shock. Like, that was that kind of part of why, I mentioned the kind of double turn, is because all of a sudden Negan's not as evil as we thought. Like, we know he has his methods, and they're harsh, but it wasn't Negan that decided to kill all the, adult males. So all of a sudden that, Negan was at a certain level of evil, and that pulls him back a little bit. And, the flip side, it pushes Simon, far beyond that. And, and then combined with kind of his actions over the last few weeks, we start to see that really, Simon is out of his mind, and he's really a psychopath. And you've got Negan almost kind of reining Simon in. That was one of those moments that caught me off guard, and I had to stop and say, oh, wow, okay, this really kind of changes things for me.
While Negan has done a bunch of very despicable things, has he done anything as despicable as Simon? Because it now appears that he didn't go to Oceanside and kill every male they had there, including the children. He didn't go into the junkyard and kill all the heapsters except for Jadis. The one that's doing all the really, really bad shit seems to be Simon. Like, all right, Negan killed a couple of people in front of all their friends, but he could have killed them all, and nobody would have batted an eye, and the rest of the saviors would have probably held him up. But that's not who Negan is. So, I mean, that's the thing, is we have kind of seen that turn, because like Rick has gotten almost bloodthirsty and will stop at almost nothing to try and get after Negan. And where Negan was even offering deals not that long ago to try and say, you know what, we can wipe this all under the table and go back to the way it was. It just seems like Simon is the crazy in the world, and it just doesn't seem like there's any way around it. And no matter how many chances he's given, he's going to revert back to crazy.
Well, and it seems like the only thing that he would respect is strength. And when he saw Negan as a source of strength, like he had command over everything, he was pre this conflict, when he had shit on lockdown, Simon was fine with going along with the program. But as this conflict is drawn out and they've lost more and more resources, and these people are just not coming to tow, I think he's lost more and more respect for Negan. I mean, even during this conversation with Gregory earlier in the show, he said the man always pulls his punches. Do you think that's why during the whole showdown in the boardroom when he made Simon get on his knees, IG, he didn't make his move? Because Simon's not the type that he's just going to lay down and die. Do you think he was calling Negan's bluff like, bitch, you ain't going to hit me with that bat?
I think maybe he was trying to call the bluff. Absolutely. But I think Negan was still playing the game. And if you're going to kill Simon, you don't do it in the room with 5 people there. You do it in front of everybody. Because you see that Simon has been rising up against you in public to everybody. So if you're going to do that show of strength, you don't do it behind a closed door because, you know, rumor mills go crazy everywhere. And the rumor mill might come that Negan had somebody else kill him, and that just shows weakness. So you literally stand out there in front of God and everybody and kill him with your bare hands. And that's exactly what happened. It's like, I'm going to let you dig your hole. I'm going to let you cause your own problem. And then I'm going to solve this in front of everybody. And I kudos to Negan for knowing how to play that game. Because, I mean, if this was like real life now where, you know, you're the boss and this guy just keeps doing everything you tell him not to do, and you're in a room with 5 people, you just fire him and send him on his way. And firing him there would have been hitting him with the bat. And he didn't do it. Like, he really wanted to show his strength to everybody, and he basically fired him in front of everybody.
All right, Ryan. So we get a second heart-to-heart talk between Negan and Dwight. Once again, he's like, thanks for staying on. You're a good guy. If you're Dwight in that moment, even before that conversation's over, would you get your Daryl cosplay kit together and get the hell out of Sanctuary? Has he not dropped you enough signs that he might possibly be onto you?
That's, I guess, part of like the trauma that he's been dealt with, you know, from Negan over the years. So I think, you know, on some level, we see it and we think, well, obviously Negan knows, and, you know, he's just taunting him. But that's how he treats Dwight. And I think, you know, Dwight always is a little scared when he's around Negan. It's like, you know, a dog that's been, you know, beaten one too many times by their owner. It's like he's always tense. He's always afraid.
Well, I'd love to sit down with Austin Emilio and ask him, or if they've told him, is Dwight a product of abuse? Because he's kind of fell in line with this whole treat me whatever way you want to treat me, just keep me around type mentality. I'll just look at the floor. You burn my face. You sleep with my wife. As long as I get to keep on living, it just makes you wonder if he's written to be preconditioned to being treated this way. He was probably treated that way his whole life. And maybe that's why he kind of grabbed and wrapped himself in the cloak of Daryl, because Daryl's been treated that way his whole life and he doesn't put up with shit from anybody. So it'd be interesting to sit down with the writers and Austin Emilio and find that out. IG, what a great idea I've got. Step 1, we steal their bullet maker. Step 2, we lock him in a dart. Ah, shit, he's gone. Was that 5 minutes of the show we'll never get back? Was there a purpose to that scene other than just a way to throw up on Rosita?
Is that not a reason enough? You know, watch somebody throw up on Rosita.
I think we've all wanted to throw up on Rosita once or twice.
At least once. And, you know, we got to live vicariously through Eugene in that moment. And holy shit, cloak of invisibility when he buried himself in that fucking pile of ashes. Eugene does have the survival skill. There's no doubt. He's got it down pat. And man, can he scurry, because he does not appear to be all that fit, you know, and I know I'm not either. And I think myself maybe a little more fit than Eugene, but I'm not sure I would have been able to scurry away that fast under fire and bury myself in Walker ashes in mere moments before they come around and just hide there quietly without coughing up my lungs from all the ash I'd just inhaled from just naturally breathing. It was really 5 minutes of wasted time for one real cool thing. So I do really think it was cool how he threw up on her and then went and hid in the ashes, but it served no purpose.
It's not The Walking Dead if there's not at least one infuriating scene. And this was on so many levels. Like, first of all, Daryl's like this master tracker. I mean, think about the stuff he's done, you know, in episodes in the past, and he couldn't tell that Eugene's hiding in the ashes. And, you know, in fact, he like clearly seemed to think he knew exactly where to go. You know, there was no point to the scene. The only purpose of this
Wouldn't there be footprints in the ashes?
Like, come on. And then Eugene, that quickly, all of a sudden, zero athleticism, and he's able to get away from Rosita, who's MacGyver. And, it was infuriating. And yeah, like, how much time would it take? Oh wow, we have walkers that come out of nowhere. The only purpose of the scene was for Eugene to basically to cement the idea in our minds that he is full Team Negan, at this point, and which maybe opens the door for some kind of a turn. But obviously with the way that they were treating him, why would he go back? That's the other thing. Is like, at least treat him okay. Yeah, he's an idiot. He's Eugene. He turned on you. He's a traitor. But if you need him for something, stop sticking knives and guns in his face and just take him. Don't threaten him even more. So just none of it made sense. None of the logic of it made sense. The whole scene was dumb. And yeah, it's like you can't be an episode without an infuriating scene.
Now, if they wouldn't have treated him that way, don't you think that maybe he would have gone along with them willingly if he still had any shred of honor left to those people? Like, I think that maybe he did still have that gleam of hope right up until that moment when Daryl and Rosita treated him that way. Maybe he was still fully Team Rick, and they came and treated him that way for no reason. Like, he to that point, yeah, like, did the Saviors get out because of him? Sure they did. But would they have gotten out anyway? Sure they would have. And how can you blame anyone for wanting to try and keep themselves alive? Because while he did get the Saviors out of the predicament they were in, it didn't immediately negatively affect Rick's group or the Hilltop or any of them. It just got them out of the trouble they were in. So until this point, he hasn't done anything that really directly caused any damage to Rick's group. I mean, it just seems like if you'd have given him that opportunity, if you'd have treated him well in that moment, he'd have walked with you and said, yeah, let's go fuck him up.
Yeah, to me, he's Team Eugene. He's always going to do what's in his best interest. And so you had a situation where, yeah, I think he would have he would have gone willingly. I don't see him turning sides by himself, but in a situation where they've captured him, if they treat him well, it's like, great, perfect situation for me. I'll just go along with it. I'm a prisoner. If Negan finds me, I was taken hostage. And if they have me, I'll say what I got to say to keep myself alive. Perfect situation. But instead, Rosita and Daryl have to treat him like shit and, essentially, cut off any potential for him to turn. So, the only thing I can think is that the purpose of the scene is to show us that, Eugene is now clearly fully Team Negan, and then maybe he sacrifices himself or does something in the end that, that shocks us because we thought he was Team Negan.
Well, what we're missing in all this too is that Eugene actually laid down a pretty convincing argument to him, like, hey, listen, I thought all this bad stuff was going to happen to me and it didn't, and these people treated me well, and I know they're doing bad things, but they didn't kill me, they didn't torture me. I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and I kept waiting to be locked in a cell, and that didn't happen either. I'm just trying to survive here. And they didn't want to hear any of it, talking about sticking him in a dark hole, calling him a pig, saying we're going to blow your head off. It was like the bonehead move of the week. The scene was terrible, and it was done really, really poorly and unbelievably, because there's no way he could have covered himself in ashes in his tracks just by the throw up and 2 or 3 walkers holding up Rosita for him to get around the corner. They once asked Ty Cobb, don't you have anything nice to say about Babe Ruth? And he said, yeah, he ran pretty well for a fat man. And for Eugene, and for somebody that needs to hit the gym like I do, Eugene, my hat's off to you, sir, because you ran pretty well for a fat man. Ryan, you had to be surprised at how quickly he moved and how quickly he got out of the air. I mean, you're a trainer. You see out-of-shape people all the time. That guy ran like greased lightning. There was no stopping him, and his hands were tied up. It was nothing but amazing. But what I've grown to love about these scenes, because we get at least one an episode, I just used to look at the TV and like, what the fuck? Now I imagine Ryan right away, and the stupider the scene, the happier I am, because I could just see him making the butthead face at the TV and his mouth just sitting agape and like, what are they doing here? They're getting paid to write this shit, and I'm spending my time where I could be out working my 17th job, making money, and I'm sitting here watching this so I can get with these 2 chuckleheads and review this show, and they're doing this with Sardine Throw Up, and hiding in ashes, and fat men running marathons. I just love every time they run their head right directly into the writing wall.
Yeah, you got that right. We should one of these maybe for next week.
We're gonna live stream Ryan next week, and we're gonna see if we can get just the look, and we're gonna post it on billboards in Manhattan.
Just post my impressions.
Just as.
Skybound does that. Whenever there's a big death or something, they'll take people's reactions and put it up on their website. I just want to see them do it once with Ryan, where he's just screaming "What the fuck" at the TV over and over again. What are you doing? You're the highest rated show on TV. You gotta give a shit. Here's my worry, IG. If Eugene was actually still Team Rick, once they snatched him up and started carrying him away and shoving guns and knives in his throat and threatening to cut his tongue out, don't you think that he might have said that to them? Like, hey, guys, I'm fucking up all their ammo here. Just put me back so I can finish this up, and that way we'll win the war?
Yeah, maybe. But, obviously they weren't hearing anything he had to say. Maybe that's what he was working toward, and all they did is keep telling him to shut the fuck up. And that's the thing, is sometimes you just got to let somebody talk. And it's honestly something that they taught us, like in the military. I mean, when you've got somebody prisoner, you let them talk, because you might get something out of them. You might get useful intel. You let them talk. You don't threaten them. You don't stick knives in their face and threaten to cut their tongues out if they don't shut the fuck up. You got to let them talk, because you know what? Even if he's not Team Rick, if he's fully Team Negan, if he's talking, he's going to slip. He's going to give you something you can use. So you let him talk and you pay fucking attention. And I don't know why people never get this, why they always want them. You just shut the hell up and sit here and do nothing. No, fucking talk away, buddy. Tell me what you know.
He came pre-waterboarded. He would have told you anything you wanted to know. He would have told you what color underwear he was wearing. If you would have asked him, you didn't have to beat information out.
No. You don't even have to ask.
He would have just told you. Simon decides that he's going to start a revolution. Let's hope he printed enough pamphlets. Despite the pass he got from Negan, Simon has still wants him gone. Ryan, not going any further into the storyline than this scene alone. Should Dwight trust Simon, or is he just setting him up to be the fall guy in case Negan finds out about this assassination attempt at his life?
Dwight should, only because I think at this point Simon's desperate, and I think he's had, I think Simon's incredibly smart, or kind of a functional psychopath, right, or sociopath, or psychopath. But Dwight realizes Simon's backed into a wall or backed into a corner, and so I think at this stage it's not really about Dwight being a fall guy. I think it's really about Simon has had his brush with power, and I don't think Simon wants to be relegated back to like a second, the second tier guy.
What would help his cause better, Ryan? I mean, what's an easier path to win in the war? Having Negan in power, or going along with Simon and having Negan taken out? Rick in the group has one less hurdle to jump across to win this thing.
I think if you're Dwight, it's a good question. I think if you're Dwight, you probably want Simon in charge, because Simon is kind of like, he's a bull. He's just going to go, he's going in one direction, and that's that. They're going to assault. It's going to be an all-out assault, and someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. I think Negan's smarter. Negan seems more of a tactician.
Yeah, he was in a bit of a pickle there. It's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. We shoot it over to the outskirts of Oceanside, IG, and Aaron fends off some walkers. They tease him dying in the process, and he lets the fishwomen know, if you don't stand for anything, you fall for everything. How did you feel about the tease on Aaron's life, and did you think our good buddy Ross might have been a goner in that moment?
The Oceanside women don't strike me as someone that's going to kill a live person for no reason. Yeah, he's in their area, but he's presented no threat to them. And he's had opportunity to present threat and has failed to do so on purpose. And it's pretty evident that it's on purpose. So they seem like a genuinely decent group of people. And so, yeah, I think teasing him was something to do, but I didn't feel for his life at that moment. I think that he's right. And that's kind of the point I was getting to earlier with you can't just stand in line and wait for your turn, because your turn is going to come. You may be a ways back in that line, but your time is coming if you don't make a decision and find a way out of that line. So, and that's my stretch on it, is that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing and wait for the saviors to come and kill me next. I'd have to make a decision and go somewhere. And I think that in that moment, and as much as he's pushed himself, Aaron may have gotten to some of them and let them know that, hey, let's get on this train and go win this thing.
This is the one show where they kill you because you don't, for lack of better things to do. So it always worries me when they put somebody in one of these side quests that mean absolutely nothing, and you're fighting for the greater good, and you're trying to suggest somebody do the right thing, and you're standing on morality mountain. That's usually when you get your ass bit. I hope that they do something a little more with Ross. They could put any number of the lesser cast members over in this storyline and let them do this. I really think he should be with main cast doing more important things, because they're wasting their asset with him falling around and being wet. I think it's a waste of his talent. I think the guy's too good for this. Simon's revolution, unfortunately, was televised to one person, Negan. So the fight for Sanctuary starts. Ryan, who did you have? I mean, did you think Negan had it in him to take Simon? And if we look at a real life scenario, is there any way that JDM is beating up Stephen Ogg in real life?
Stephen Ogg is jacked, as we know,
and tall.
Yeah, you don't see it so much in this, but we saw in Westworld he's huge. So I don't think that this fight goes quite the same way in a real life fight. But obviously, it's The Walking Dead. Negan's not losing a one-on-one fight to almost anyone not named Rick. So yeah, so I was pretty sure about how this was going to turn out. It was exciting. It was exciting while it lasted, but I think we all knew the result. It was pretty clear that Simon was going to be dead, and that's that, because nobody's beating Negan one-on-one unless it's Rick.
What did you think, IG? I mean, I know you've read the comic books, and Negan in the comic books looks like a linebacker, and that's the one thing that we lost. They picked the perfect actor for the role, but he's not as physically imposing as the guy from the comic book. You look at the two standing next to each other, and Stephen Ogg even said this on Talking Dead, like, up until that point, I wasn't even sure if Negan could fight. I thought he was just a bat. So what did you think going into that fight? Did you give our good old buddy Simon a chance in hell at winning that fight?
Well, there was a small chance, because you know what? Anytime somebody gets into a fight, there's a chance. But, I think part of the reason Negan is always wearing leather jacket is to give him a little bit of an appearance of size. Like, I think there's a little bit of padding in that jacket to make him look a little bigger than he is. And they put the ascot on him to make it look like he's got more neck. It's just one of those, it's a trick, because they can't really make him look bigger. They don't have the Captain America budget to make, tiny Steve into big Steve. So they're doing what they can, and kudos to them for trying. But, you knew that Simon is a second or third tier character all along anyway, and he's done a wonderful job. Stephen Ogg is amazing. I love him. I think he's a great man. I met him at Walker Stalker as well, and I had a great conversation with him. I could say nothing but nice things about the man, and he is jacked, by the way. You're absolutely right. But in this world, he's just not going to beat Negan, and Negan even let him hit him more than once. Let him hit him. He knew it was telegraphed. If he didn't know that hit was coming, then he doesn't deserve to be alive anymore, because it was really telegraphed that hit was coming. So, yeah, he let him hit him a few times and then literally just crushed his throat. And it accomplished everything. It really got the rest of the saviors to believe that, yep, we're following the right guy, because he gave him his shot. He said, go ahead, here I am. To be the man, you got to beat the man. And he couldn't beat the man. So I didn't really give him a shot, because I think he was a little too full of himself at the moment. So even if he were the stronger man, I think he was overconfident, and that would have been his downfall, is that he wouldn't have been watching for the next thing to come through.
So your plan is in bad shape when it hinges on Gregory doing the right thing, but Dwight sends him off to warn Rick. Dwight is offered the number 2 job, only to have the carpet pulled out from under him when Laura, of all people, shows up. So that was the answer to who was in the car. IG, did Dwight the scum weasel forget the cardinal rule, which is rule number 1, you never leave a witness alive?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's like, he should have popped out when he did, when he was being chased by Tara and everything, and keep himself alive, and then try and do a couple of things, and then break the fuck out. Because especially once Negan showed back up, you pack your shit, you get your stick with your little handkerchief and all your stuff inside, and run off like a hobo. You need to get the fuck out, because you know it's coming to get you. It's gonna break down real soon. And all he did was continue to stay there, like, I can subvert this from the inside, like he's smarter than Negan. And apparently he's not, because Negan just gets out of everything. And why don't you know this by now? You literally took the iron from this man, so you should know. I don't know. And he did, I guess he didn't leave the witness alive, but he didn't make sure she was dead. He knew that someone got away. He just didn't know who. And at that point, you never go back. You find other ways to get out. And even if you join up with them for a moment, maybe he should have killed those three saviors, like let them lead out in front of him and pop, 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 done, and run back to the hilltop and get back in the team you need to be with. He made a lot of critical mistakes there.
I personally would have wrapped myself in the Laura is a traitor cloak as soon as I got back. I would have told everybody in Sanctuary that would listen repeatedly how Laura killed everybody and she's with Rick's group, just in case she came back. But I don't think Dwight is that forward thinking. I think he just crossed his fingers and hoped that she was dead. And it really came back to bite him in the ass in the end, because if he chokes Simon to death for trying to pretty much take over, what's he going to do to Dwight for this, basically sleeping with the enemy routine that he's done? So it turns out Negan was playing the long con, Ryan, making Dwight do his dirty work and setting up Rick with false intel. Was tonight a return for the Savior Leader? I mean, he physically beat Simon, he mentally beat Dwight, and he kept it together and looked great doing it. I mean, was this Negan's coming out party, so to speak, leading into the finale?
Yes and no. I think on one hand, I really did. You're right. I think Negan had a great episode and showed just how, again, he's using that kind of analogy or metaphor again, he's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers or something else. He's clearly on a different level strategically. He can read people. He's far beyond everybody else, especially on the Savior side of things. The only issue I have with it is, as you said, we're kind of right. We're back to where we're back to where we expected to be at the end of, heading into the end of the season. And, you could have asked me first episode of the season, and I would have predicted that this is where, not the details, but this is where we would be leading, that there would be an all-out battle between the two sides. And the reason why I'm disappointed in this is because a couple episodes ago, I was excited because, the kind of our expectations were subverted with Negan's little side quest with Jadis. And so I actually thought maybe they're going to go somewhere else. Maybe they're not going to do what we expected. But it turns out, a few episodes later, things come right back around and we're right back to where we expected to be heading into the end of the season. And so I think that's just a little bit of a disappointment for me, because I kind of was hoping that maybe they would start doing some things different and surprising us, but it wasn't meant to be.
Well, I think last week's episode killed a little bit of momentum. I think they build the momentum up and then they go on these side episodes and it kind of kills it a little bit. I think building into this, and I think this episode did, building into the end, you want to ramp it up. You want to go into it with a fever pitch. And I think we got that with the Battle of Hilltop, and then we lost a little bit of it with last week's episode. And then we started to get it back again, because now Negan looks like a formidable opponent who very well has this all figured out and has the good guys in hand. IG, what did you think of the big Simon reveal? He gets choked to death. They put him out on the fence. What did you think? Is he the scariest cast member Walker since Merle?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I put him basically right next to Merle as far as Walkerized main cast members. He was scary. And I mean, you could even tell that his windpipe had been crushed by how he was snarling and growling, because it sounded raspy and hindered. And I just thought that it was all very well done. Again, one of the things that they never fail at is their makeup and effects team. They are amazing. They do great work. So I can never say a bad thing about how the walkers look and how they are all different. They don't have like a uniform walker makeup they put on somebody. Everybody's different. And if they need you to look like the same walker every week, they can make each person look the same every week. So it's not a mistake. They can do this on purpose. And I'm completely impressed. And I really loved what they did with Simon's walker. It was really, really cool.
Ryan, what were your thoughts on Michonne's attempt to read Carl's letter to Negan over the radio, his rebuff of the letter, the episode, and your rating?
So actually, I like that scene. I think it was almost like a Hail Mary on Michonne's part. I think she realizes there's lots going to go on, and Carl obviously had some relationship with Negan and had some Negan's respect, and we can see that between when Negan found out about his death a few weeks ago and this moment, that it affects him. He's actually affected by which also makes me a little bit disappointed that we don't get to see more of Negan and Carl together. I did like the scene. I like the way it plays out, and I think also that Negan's done. He that's it. He's they're headed for better or worse. They're heading for the hilltop, and we're going to get that final battle. I just hope that there's some finality to it and that there's some closure here, one way or another. The episode, when it was focused on Negan, I think it was strong, and obviously most of the episode was. So I think I liked most of it. Obviously, the Eugene scene was just ridiculous, and the stuff with Aaron, well, I understand why it's there, but it felt really just unnecessary. So again, it's kind of, you have a good episode with a few parts there that just are, if I had a hair pulling. So I would say my overall rating, I'd probably give it, I'd like to give it an 8, but I think it's definitely brought down a point by the Eugene situation. It just drove me crazy. So I'm going to give it a 7. So better than a lot of the season, but
a whole point for the Eugene scene.
Yes. That insanity. But no, I'll give it a solid 7.
Listen, I love this episode for a lot of reasons. And I have to say that Dwight is either the bravest person on the planet during the zombie apocalypse or the stupidest. I'm not quite sure where he falls. We'll see how it all plays out. And I know the fandom hates Simon and Gregory together, but they bring so much to their show in their respective roles. I hate the fact that we're not going to see that again. Losing Simon from the show broke my heart a little bit. Some of the WTF moments for me, like Daryl and Rosita on their field trip to the factory, we could have done without, but it also kind of improves Eugene's position, and it also adds a lot of mystery to which team he's on and whether he's going to do the right thing or not. And we got to see Rosita get thrown up on, which is always a plus in my book. They obviously didn't read the "do not kidnap" till after 30 minutes of eating posted signs, but we have one episode left. Let's see who lives. Let's see who dies. Let's see how this pans out, because I'm ready for the season to be over. As much as I love The Walking Dead, I want a conclusion to the storyline so we can move on. And I am hella excited for the Lenny James crossover on Fear the Walking Dead. It looks like they're bringing in some great characters. It looks like they're really revamping the show. For this episode, I think the episode is at least worth a 9. And if you know what I'm talking about, you see what I did there.
Well, I like how they bookended basically Carl's letter on both ends of this episode. I think that added a sense of heart on each end. I really even more liked how Negan rebuffed it, similar to how Rick rebuffed everything earlier in the season. This has just been a long time coming. I think something's going to happen, and I don't think, this is just my long shot prediction, I don't think either Rick or Negan is going to die next week. And I don't think anybody else major outside of maybe Maggie, but I really hope not, because I think you're going to lose a lot of viewers if you kill Maggie next week. That being said, there's a lot of things to like in this episode, a lot of things to not like. You know what? I liked Eugene throwing up on Rosita. I'm going to say it. You guys, whatever. You just don't know what you're talking about. That shit is awesome. But I liked pretty much all of this, and I'm not going to give it a 9, but I'll give it an 8. I'll give it a strong 8, and I really did enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to watch, and it really did set up the finale. And that's what we need, is we needed a little ramp up, go into the finale. Tensions are high. People are ready to go. So let's get this going. Let's see what happens. If you got any predictions, we want to hear them. Send them on over to us at CINIKRADIO@gmail.com. Or you can find us on the internet at CINIKRADIO.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRADIO. You can also find us on Instagram at CINIKRADIO, or you can come on over to the Walking Dead Underground fan group on Facebook. Just go to Facebook, search for the Walking Dead Underground. Again, more than 40,000 members over there. All the news, the funniest memes, and the greatest time you can have talking about The Walking Dead. I'm Igrihe. With me have been Cinik and Ryan. We had a great time this week. We'll be back next week with the finale and a look at the next season of Fear the Walking Dead. Continue to share and subscribe this with all your friends, family, loved ones, and even ones you don't love. Thanks again for all the listens. Thanks for all the likes. Thank you for all the love you've been giving us. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and at thewalkingdeadunderground.com. Join us in our fight against the saviors.